And joining me now is Republican Senator Eric Schmitt of Missouri. Senator Schmitt, welcome to Meet the Press.
It's great to be with you just 2.5 weeks after President Trump completed the greatest political comeback in American history, winning all the battleground states, the popular vote, getting a mandate from the American people to shake things up in Washington, and look forward to helping him do that with our new majority in the Senate and with our friends in the House.
Well, it's great to have you here and to have your perspective. Let's start right there. And this decision by former Congressman Matt Gaetz to withdraw his name from consideration for Attorney General, it comes as NBC News has learned that 5 Republican senators were planning to vote against Gaetz. Do you believe it was a mistake by President-elect Trump to pick Gaetz in the first place, Senator?
Well, I think Matt Gaetz made a decision, and I respect that decision. And we're moving on now to the nominee that he's chosen, Pam Bondi, who I know very well. We come from state attorney general world. Pam has taken on the tough fights. She took on drug trafficking. She took on human trafficking. She's a tough career prosecutor. She's smart. She's tough. It's a great pick. And the Justice Department is ripe for reform. So I think President Trump is picking reformers for these cabinet positions. He campaigned on that, and he's delivering on that promise. We are going to delve into that in just a moment. But just to stay on this issue of Matt Gaetz for a moment, given the severity of allegations he was facing, allegations of sexual misconduct, including that he had sex with a minor at a party in 2017, which he denies. But do you think that he should have been picked in the first place? I think President Trump deserves the ability, with the mandate that he got for the American people, to put people in positions who are going to do reform. There's some things we can do in Congress, oversight and legislation, but you really need reformers at the head of these different agencies. And I think you're seeing that as a common theme. I'm sure we'll talk about more of them, but there really is a lot of reform that needs to happen in the administrative state. And he's talked about it a lot on the campaign trail. And like I said, he's delivering on that.
Well, let's talk about Pam Bondi, who we were just talking about, the former Florida Attorney General. Bondi has vowed to, quote, investigate the investigators, to prosecute the prosecutors. A different tone than you have struck, Senator. You've said that the DOJ should be, quote, going back to fighting crime and not settling political scores. How do you square those two different views?
Well, I will tell you that Pam Bondi has a track record. She's a very serious person. And I think she's seen the weaponization. Everybody's seen this weaponization of the Justice Department over the last 4 years. It really is a tragedy for a once respected agency that has gone after Catholics. It's gone after parents who showed up to school board meetings under the auspices of the Patriot Act. This is in the United States of America. And then clearly weaponized that department, Joe Biden did, and Merrick Garland, to go after their chief political opponent. And I'll tell you, Kristen, the arc of that story is really terrifying if you care about the Republic. After the midterms, Joe Biden said that there was no way President Trump would ever be back in the White House. After that speech, these zombie cases were resurrected. The number 3 person from DOJ went to New York, and you had the Alvin Bragg case. The number 2 prosecutor in Atlanta went to the White House and coordinated. You saw all these cases resurrected. They all fell apart under the weight of the law. And so I do think there needs to be accountability. I think that getting it back to crime fighting is important, but there has to be accountability for these kinds of abuses.
Okay, what specifically does accountability look like, Senator? Are you suggesting you want to see Special Counsel Jack Smith, Attorney General Merrick Garland prosecuted? Is that what you are implying?
Well, no, I think accountability means first and foremost, the people involved in this should be fired immediately. And anybody part of this this effort to keep President Trump off the ballot and to throw him in jail for the rest of his life because they didn't like his politics and to continue to cast him as a quote-unquote threat to democracy was wrong. And so we'll see where that goes. But I just don't think in this country, unless we want to be a banana republic, I don't want to see that happen. You can't have the Justice Department abused in this way. Pam Bondi is a smart, capable, tough person who I think is going to restore respect in that department.
So she has your vote, Senator?
Oh, absolutely. I intend to help Pam Bondi get the votes. I know her well. She's a friend. I've come to respect Pam Bondi. She was a great attorney general in Florida. This is a home run by President Trump.
All right. Well, let's talk about another potential nominee. More details about the sexual assault allegation against Pete Hegseth, Mr. Trump's pick for the defense secretary. The police report filed at the time says, and I'm going to read this for you, quote, Jane Doe stated she got up and tried to leave the room. but Hegseth blocked the door with his body. Jane Doe remembered saying no a lot. Hegseth was not charged in this case. He denies any wrongdoing. But, Senator, you have a long history of fighting for sexual assault victims as Missouri's Attorney General. Does this incident raise concerns about his confirmation for you?
Well, I think that's why we have the confirmation process. Senators certainly are going to ask questions about it. They should, and he has a right to answer. What he said so far is that he did no wrong. They're baseless. And it's important to note the prosecutor didn't bring any charges. Be interesting to see if there's any other memorandum from that prosecutor that would go along with that prosecutor's decision not to charge Pete Hegseth. But I think ultimately this is a decision that President Trump made to bring in another disruptor. And I think if you look at this election, it was disruptor versus establishment. He ran on this. And there needs to be reform in the Pentagon, whether it's procurement, whether it's getting rid of divisive DEI that's dividing our military by race. There's no place in our military. I think he's talked about eliminating that. And then also making sure our focus is on our chief adversary, China.
Let me ask you, I guess, big picture, Senator. You're on the Armed Services Committee, and there's a known sexual assault problem in the military. Do you believe that Pete Hegseth is the right person to lead the military, given all of that, at this very moment?
Well, he's not been charged with anything, of course, and I think that's important. And so you read from a police report. I've not seen the police report, but again, I'd like to. There's probably more documentation around this that would be interesting to see.
So I hear you saying you have questions.
Well, of course I'm going to have questions, but that police report and no charges being brought, I think, again, answers itself. If there was, something to be done here, I'm sure the prosecutor would have pursued it. She didn't, which speaks to that issue, I think. But ultimately, the Pentagon needs reform. And I think Pete Hegseth is a guy that President Trump trusts to go do that kind of reform, eliminating DEI, being more innovative in our Pentagon. There's a lot of red tape. It's failed another audit. And I think also having somebody who's served on the front lines, who has the soldiers' point of view on this would be really, really important.
Let's talk about the pick of Tulsi Gabbard for DNI. Here is what the former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley had to say about Tulsi Gabbard. Take a look.
This is not a place for a Russian, Iranian, Syrian, Chinese sympathizer. DNI has to analyze real threats. Are we comfortable with someone like that at the top of our national intelligence agencies?
So, Senator, what say you? Are you comfortable? Will you vote for Tulsi Gabbard?
I think it's really interesting that anybody that has a different political view now is being cast as a Russian asset. It's totally ridiculous. Tulsi Gabbard has served in our military. She served as a congresswoman from Hawaii, as a Democrat, I might add, part of this unique coalition that President Trump has put together and won and got that mandate. But I think it's insulting. It's a slur, quite frankly. There's no evidence that she's an asset of another country. She served this country honorably. And by the way, she cares deeply about our Constitution and civil liberties and making sure people aren't being targeted by these intelligence agencies. So again, I think this is a reformer who can come in, who maybe is not part of the same Washington cocktail party circuit that people in the intel community are used to, but maybe that's exactly what we need right now. President Trump listened to the American people when they screamed about these issues. They want to be heard. They feel like Washington's broken, and I think bringing somebody in like Tulsi Gabbard is a welcome news.
So you're a yes on Tulsi Gabbard, Senator, just to be clear?
I'm a yes on Pam Bondi. I'm a yes on Pete Hegseth. I'm a yes on Tulsi Gabbard. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Let me zoom out a little bit. The Trump transition team has so far bypassed traditional background checks for his cabinet picks. Are you confident that all of Mr. Trump's picks will be fully and properly vetted before this confirmation process?
I am, and I think that's an important role of the United States Senate, right? It's a uniquely American institution for a bunch of reasons. We have the role of advice and consent, and as we go through, whether it's armed services or judiciary, any of the committees that are going to be vetting these candidates for these positions, absolutely, it's going to be thorough. It should be. We should ask tough questions. That's part of the process. So I have full confidence that that's exactly what we're going to have moving forward.
All right, let's do a little bit of foreign policy now. We've seen the war in Ukraine obviously escalate this week. I wonder, do you support the U.S. staying in NATO and recommitting itself to the idea that an attack against one is an attack against all?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's talking about, and not even me, talking about exiting NATO. But I do think what President Trump has brought to the table in his first 4 years, and what I think he will bring, is that it's time for our European allies to step up. I think American taxpayers are tired of footing the bill all the time for the wars in Europe. And, specifically as it relates to Ukraine, I think they need to step up. There's been no definition of what victory looks like. There's been no definition, sort of the accountability. People have thwarted efforts to have, independent audits of how the money is being spent. So I think our European allies need to step up. We're not exiting from NATO, but I do think President Trump has an opportunity to usher in a new era of American realism, where as far as this country's concerned, our core national interests are defined by what America's needs are, protecting the homeland, pivoting to China, and making sure European allies play a meaningful role in the defense of that continent.
Well, Senator, let me ask you this. Would you object, would you push back if President-elect Trump were to say that he wanted to pull out of NATO? Do you think it's essential the U.S. stays in?
He's not talked about that at all. What he has talked about is actually them spending more money on their defense. And they started to do that after a lot of whining initially. They started to do that, and I don't think they've met where they should go. I think that threshold should be higher than what it is right now. Again, the American taxpayers deserve a president who understands that they might be tired of subsidizing the social welfare programs in Europe, and that message is going to be delivered. It's being delivered here today. It's been delivered 4 years ago under President Trump. But again, these are very important relationships for us in Europe. But I do think it's time for our European allies to step up more financially and for their own defense.
All right. Senator Schmitt, your first time being on the program. We really appreciate your being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.